Hi, it's Norman Kochnick here for Eyes on Cricket with Norman Kochnick. And I'm very fortunate to have a mate of mine who I've known for a few years now. I've had him on a previous TV show where he had a good old yarn up there in Queensland. This man is an amazing person. He's done literally everything he can possibly do as a human being. He's been, a professional boxer, a martial arts expert. I think you've probably been modelling women's fashion at some stage. I'm not sure. Maybe there was some of that going on. But you've done everything possible. And look at him. He looks as fit as anything there with his shirt on. He's rippling with muscles. I won't admit to his age, but you can all go on to Quick Info later and have a little look. But he looks, I reckon, close to 20 years younger, and it puts me to shame. It's none other than a former English cricketer, a man who has been the true sense of an all-rounder, led his country in the shorter format, knows all about Test cricket, has had an amazing family, and some good and some bad happened in his life regarding family, which we could talk about perhaps. But more importantly, he's a top bloke, and it's Adam Hollioake. Nice to see you, Adam.
Hey, Norman. How are you, mate? Thanks for having me.
Very well. You've got a lot of very excited viewers. They've been all messaging me saying, when's Adam on? And obviously, stupid Norman forgot about daylight savings and the fact that basically Queensland's now behind everything, isn't it? No, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So you're on the Gold Coast still? Everything's going well?
Yes, mate. I'm on the Gold Coast. I've been there for, I think, nearly 10 years now. So everything's nice and relaxed up here. Obviously, I haven't been hit by Corona as much as other parts in the world and other states in Australia. So everything's pretty much trucking along as normal up here, mate. Just cruising along.
You sound less and less English every time I talk to you, by the way. Do you bung on the English accent when necessary, or?
No, not really. I think I'm one of those people that depending on who I'm talking to, I think I can change like a chameleon. Like, you want to hear me ringing up and ordering Chinese, I think I'm talking a Chinese accent, or an Indian, I'll talk with an Indian accent. So depends on who I'm talking to. But I'm talking to English friends back in England, and I think I put on the English accent a bit. So just trying to fit in with the show, mate, so you can understand me. I'm talking not Australian, so you'd understand me.
Yeah, I've got limitations, is what you're saying. Look at it. Thank you very much. Look, there's a lot we can talk about. Obviously, you being English, the big thing that's towards the next few weeks is England playing India at home, which is a massive deal, especially for both English and Indian audiences, but for Australians as well. It's a pretty pivotal series. I think out of that may end up seeing the team that will play in the so-called World Cup, not World Cup, the Test final at Lords in June. And I think both England and India are in the frame with New Zealand. Australia's on the outer a little bit, but and did you go to the cricket up there when Australia played India recently at the Gabba?
I didn't. I was unfortunately I had some work going on, but I was obviously keeping up and watching the scores and watching it on TV when I could. So obviously I coach a couple of the guys in that side, so I have interest in the Australian side, that is. So I had interest in that particular game. But is it Test cricket just alive and well? It's like
amazing
series got coming up. England in India. I mean, this series out here in India, it was a fantastic series. The standard of the cricket was so high, and I saw an article in the newspaper which was laughing. Mark Waugh, Mark Taylor, Michael Clark, Ricky, I think, who all said that India had no winning after they went down, and Virat Kohli went home. And for India to come back and win that, they were laughing how those particular pundits had got it wrong. And I was like, well, I don't know why people are laughing at it. I thought the same thing. I thought you could win. So that's what's great about our game, is it's unpredictable. If you want to go and watch a movie, you go to the movie, you can work out what's going to happen. The hero is going to be the hero, and you can see, that guy's going to end up, the good-looking guy's going to end up with the good-looking woman, and they're very predictable. But Test cricket at the moment is so unpredictable. Who would have thought New Zealand was number one in the world? So,
exactly.
Incredible. So I think we're coming into a great time. Got England going to India. I think if England beat India in India, they've got to be close to being number one world in one side in the world. I'd have to beat. I think so. They'd be third at the moment, wouldn't they?
They would. I mean, the actual New Zealand's up there. Australia's just toppled a bit. I think India's second.
I think New Zealand's one.
Yeah.
Two. I think England might be three, and then I think Australia might be four. So England have got a really interesting. They go to India. If they tip India over, then they go back to England and they play New Zealand at home. So if they can beat India in India, which is a big if, because
yeah,
it'll be very hard to beat in India, and then go back and beat in England, then they'll become the number one side in the world. I'm pretty sure of that.
It is very close up there. It's a very, very close.
But saying that, that's a huge task. Yeah, I think beating New Zealand in England will be an easier task than beating India in India. So,
especially now with the way they've gone.
Yeah,
recently.
Absolutely.
I mean, most of the discussions we've had so far, and I've had quite a few about India in particular, the reality is they should win the series quite comfortably against England. But the only thing that concerns me is when you have had such a great high like they did here in Australia at the Gabba and that crescendo, even though there were a lot of young players, sometimes you do have a lull the next game, don't you? It's hard to keep that up. Would you agree, or would you think they're going to cream them?
Well, I love the way you concerns you. I presume you're giving away your allegiance there and you want India to beat England. But that's everyone knows whenever, other than us English who play for England. So that's no surprise. The rest of the world will be here to beat England over there. So that would be the biggest concern. Is that, I mean, that's a small concern that you picked out there. When you think the confidence they must have gained from winning out here in these conditions, which are the most alien conditions to an Indian player, whilst losing their best player, and then, well, probably the two or three of their best players, a couple of their good bowlers and their best batsmen. That must be one of the biggest backs in Test history. It has to be. I mean, it didn't necessarily look like it in terms of the result. Maybe Australia in India when they India beating Australia when they were in that Test match over there was also very big. With
you mean with Luxman and Dravid when that game was turned around?
Yeah, that was also a very big comeback. But that was within a game. But to come back from within a series where you've been beaten on the ground where you probably think you've got your best chance with your full side, gone 1-0 down in a 3-match series, lose your best player through injury. I think Virat Kohli went home because of the birth of his daughter, and that's just. I mean, that people were laughing at Mark War, and if I'm getting it wrong, I went, well, he can't be blamed. I thought they wouldn't win either. So yeah, it's crazy.
Well, the reality is, even up to the second last session, they'd drawn in Sydney, which was amazing to start with, after get back against the wall, then to actually come to the second last session of the day with 245 to win. I'm sure you and I were not thinking you can get 245 in 2 sessions on the last day of a wearing pitch with your batters up against the wall. You wouldn't think you could do that, but they got 100 in the middle session and then 145 in the last at a canter.
I wouldn't have thought they'd get 245. If they could have had Virat Kohli there, they brought Sachin Tendulkar out of the time and bring Sunil Gavaskar as well. I still wouldn't think they'd get them. So to do it with the players, incredible.
Well, Gavaskar was in the stands. Gavaskar was in the stands. He could have come down quickly, though.
Yeah, he's gold, mate.
No, but it's true. I mean, and look, from your perspective, and you've had backs against the wall performances too, where you captaining your side in a one-day series when probably people thought, "Why are you captaining the side?" In a way, but you pulled off some great results. Tell us about that. I mean, that was remarkable what you did.
When you say that people were laughing, wondering why I was kept on the side, is that because of my Australian birth or because I wasn't very good?
Well, partly, but to go from outside the team into the side, regardless of form, that's quite amazing.
Well, I guess I'd played. I think when I got the captaincy of that particular tournament you're talking about, the Champions Trophy out in Sharjah.
Yeah.
I'd only played 5 one-day internationals. So I was probably just trying to keep my place in the team. And then we went out to play in that trophy tournament. It was in Dubai with Pakistan, India, and the West Indies. Now, the West Indies were probably in a similar situation to us, but Pakistan and India were playing every second game in Dubai, and that was like their home ground. So everyone was like, well, West Indies, England are coming out to make up the numbers, and it's going to be between Pakistan and India. Added to that was all of our best players, not all of our players, but a lot of our best players rested. So Michael Acton, who was captain at the time, which allowed me to captain, took a rest. Darren Goff took a rest. Haddock took a rest. There was a few players, so it was a very second string attack. We had Dougie Brown, a very good county cricketer, but definitely not an opening bowler in international cricket. He's opening the bowling with Dean Headley, so it was a really side, and I'm fortunate I was captain of that, because I think a lot of the other sides took us for granted, and they just thought, oh, well, we're not going to do anything. But one thing, their players were household names, you know, like we're talking Jadeh, Dulka, Azharuddin, Srinath, Venkatesh Prasad. They were all well players, you know, Wasim Akram, Waqar Yunus.
At their peak. At their peak.
But they were, well, we'd been sitting there. And you would have as well, mate, because you love watching cricket. So you'd have been sitting there. We knew their game inside. We'd been watching them for years. They didn't know Adam Hollioake. I played 5 games for England. They didn't know Dougie Brown, who played 2 games for England. They didn't know Fleming. So we could hit them with one-off games. So we hit them with tactics, and they know how we played. So we could hit them with one-off games, and we beat them. So it was.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That comparison's amazing.
I wouldn't like to have played Pakistan or India in a 5-match series, because I believe that after a period of time, those experienced and very intelligent cricketers would have worked us out, and they would have formulated a plan to defeat us. But you know, one-off hit and run, we were fortunate. We got away with it, and we got the win.
Oh, look, to me, but you were inspirational, because you were not expected to do well. You came in, as you said, with 5 matches under your belt, and you not only performed well, you performed fantastically, and you had an era which, if I stand corrected, you was one of the best ODI captaincy records on especially in the English side.
Yeah, I think it was my record away from was better than my one at home, which is strange. I'm not sure that. I think I just like getting away from the wife. I think so. Yeah.
But you had an astounding record. You told me at the time when I interviewed you last about the significance of that, and especially having come from not nowhere in terms of no captaincy in the side to being captain. And I mean, you had a period of time where you were not eligible to play, correct? That's what led to the delay in you actually playing.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure if I would have been picked anyway, but yeah, I definitely had to serve a period of time before I was eligible to play for England, which is strange, because I had been in England since I was 12 years old. A lot of people think that I went to England to get into the English side because I wasn't good enough to get into the Australian side, but I went to England when I was 12. And the fact is, I probably wasn't good enough. Probably wasn't good enough to get into the Australian side, but I didn't know that at the age of 12 that I was going to end up doing it. But that's that's how that came about. And then my whole career, like, I'd never really been a captain, and then we'd had a lot of captains who tried at Surrey, and they hadn't necessarily taken the job. So they came and asked me, and I literally, when they asked me captain, I had to look behind me. I thought someone was standing behind me, and them, because I wasn't your typical captaincy stay and do the right thing. I was quite outspoken and brash. Never really had any position. I hadn't even been a prefect at school, I don't think. So it was a strange one, and then it just sort of evolved from there. I found that I get on well with people pretty well, and I've got an ability to communicate with people from every, different religions, different race, different backgrounds, different, social demographics. So I found that, I just treated everybody the same, and it kind of just worked. If my captain kind of went on that, just everyone's equal, just go out and try our best. And I think I was quite good at taking away the fear of failure, but I think my captaincy sort of revolved on that. I wouldn't say I was necessarily a tactical genius, or I wasn't like, let's have a fielder 20 yards off the boundary and then the boundary hits it straight to it. I don't think my captaincy was about. I think it was just more about making people feel the team and just confident to go out and try their best. I think that was more what it was about.
But the two things you've just said fearless, have no fear, be fearless, and having and backing yourself and allowing people to be there, having that relationship where you get the best out of people is exactly what Rahane did, certainly in the last 3 tests. And certainly Coley leading up would give that impetus of fearlessness. You've almost summed up the reason why you were successful there and then.
Isn't it interesting, though, with Coley and Rahane? I mean, I don't know either of those guys intimately. I don't know them well. But isn't it interesting, like Coley comes across as such a brash and the guy that you would typically imagine to be leading from the front, like charging from on the front line if he was troops, you know what I mean? And then Rahane was quietly spoken, but they're both able to inspire their troops in totally different ways. And I think people typically think of captains as people shouting and making coaches as well. You know, when I started a career in coaching in the last 4 or 5 years, in my mind, coaching was about going in there and taking a side that's bottom of the table and yelling at everybody and saying something inspirational to go from bottom to top. But it's not like that. It's really like that. You just inspire people by not necessarily by shouting or giving these incredible Churchillian type speeches, just by being consistent as a human being and trying to take away the fear of failure. I think people enjoy that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a calm sort of sense of confidence as well, that when you talk about the way you do, you see quite clearly, and people see that in you and they follow you. And you step back when someone's taking the lead in that manner. You know how to judge a person's character, as what you're saying. To have a Rahane and a Coley and then ultimately a Pajara and even a Rohit Sharma on the team, they're all captains in a way, aren't they? They've been vice captain or captain thereabouts, and they play certain roles, and that's where that gelling comes together. And I think you take your hats off to Shastri for what he's done probably as a coach. Would have to be a part of that.
Well, it doesn't surprise me when, like you said, those guys have got in the side. They're very different, but ultimately the goal is the side to be the best. I remember, I think it was Pajara doing that dance that he does, or so you can tell that always people, these different characters are accepted within that unit. And I don't know, it's a very modern Indian feel about it. Like the old Indian feel was that they were just subservient and they would just roll over. But I think Kohli's given them a little bit of steel, and then, you know, Pajara and that they seem, you know, create just a good atmosphere. And so very modern India, I think, that's coming through in their cricket. I mean, India, but back in the old days, you know, it's the history of India is there for everybody to see. But I think that's now starting to come across through their cricket, and they're expressing themselves. And I think that's probably why they're the #1 side in the world.
Absolutely. Just quickly I've had some people say there's no voice, but you can hear me clearly, can't you? And I can hear you. So it's probably going to be occasionally dropping out. That's all right. Let's just quickly take you to your coaching. You've just mentioned you coach some of the Australian players. Who are they, and what's the story with them?
So, well, basically every Queensland player who's playing for Australia, I'm the batting coach at Queensland. So when I coach Joe Burns, Marnus Labuschagne, Jack Wildermuth, who's been in and around the Australian side, Michael Nectar, Mark Steckety, who's in the squad now. Yep. So I know some of those guys are bowlers, but I'm the batting coach at Queensland, so it's not like I'm there. They're out and personally chosen as the coach, just like that's my job at Queensland. So,
but with your Queensland batting coaching role, you've got Labuschagne, who's amazing, and I know that he had something to do with a fellow called DeCosta in Sydney for a little while as well at one stage,
Yeah.
didn't he? Yeah.
Oh,
But
he's got several people through his career who would have helped him. I know Matthew Maynard at Glamorgan in England has had a lot to do with his side. I mean, I can't take credit for the miraculous upturn form. I'd love to be able to say that's all because of me, but that would be a lie. So he's an excellent student, and that he takes bits from all the coaches that he's come across, and he's come across like that DeCosta, and I believe he's got another coach here in Brisbane who he's seen a lot. Matthew Maynard, another person, obviously Steve Smith.
Yeah.
You obviously get bits
It's the best
from everyone. Yeah, and that's probably why he's the best batsman in the world, right?
Yeah. The other thing, you coached, you had some incredible gigs overseas in the last few years. Tell us about those, because you've been far afield, haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, well, when I started back, I mean, I hadn't been in cricket for over a decade. So I was coming up for 15 years that I had been out of the game. So you sort of got to earn your stripes again, haven't you? You've got to start at the bottom. So one of my first gigs was going to the Afghan Premier League in over there in Kabul. So it was amazing until they tried to blow us up. So we were victims, the targets of a suicide bomber, and 9 of our security and some civilians were killed in that attack. So,
oh my gosh,
that was an interesting time. I was over there with Dean Jones and Herschel Gibbs and a couple of other guys. So, it was a pretty rough time.
So, but then have a look at how well Afghanistan have done as a team. They've excelled, haven't they? They've had a number of very good, victories. It's quite a level. They actually attained certain positions within a World Cup ranking, which is beyond my belief how that could ever be possible. You can't even conduct a game, let alone get a good enough team.
Yeah. I when I went there, they hadn't quite reached. I think they were in the process of getting their international status. So this has been 4 years ago or something like that. I think they got it whilst I was out there, maybe. And when I went there and I saw the talent on show, I was like, these guys, we're going to have, the rest of the world's going to be careful because these guys are good. Because they're like India and Pakistan, and that's the game they play. I mean, you go out in the street, you see dry, barren land. You're not playing rugby on that, mate. No, you're not playing that. You're playing cricket. That's about all you're going to do. So they've got a decent sized population, and the other thing is they're big, strong, athletic race of people. Whereas a lot of the Indians there's 1.3 billion Indians, but there's vegetarians, and maybe they're not the biggest, strongest race. I mean, still they're outstanding cricketers, but you add the size of there's a Russian influence. So they've got big physical guys, a lot of really tall, strong guys. And then obviously their passion for cricket, and then the international status. If they get their structure right, the rest of the world better watch out, because I think they're a real force to be reckoned with.
Amazing. It's an amazing story, really. Under the, again, adverse conditions that they've been able to get that to happen, and the raw talent as you're describing as well. All right, I have to ask a question. I had a chat to a gentleman who has something to do with England, and you'll know who he is pretty quickly. The question is, how is your ankle after going fishing with Spider-Man back around, I think it was 2002-3, or some sort of fishing expedition? What transpired there? And who am I talking about? Who asked that question?
You're talking about Alan Mullally, who refers to himself as the Spider-Man. Never quite worked out why. I still don't know to this why he's called that, but the answers to why I call him that, and everyone else calls him that. I'm not sure if it was one of those self-appointed nicknames, or if they. Oh, I know why it is, actually. I do remember, because he got bitten by a redback spider. So
really?
he then got the nickname Spider. So yeah, Alan Mullally, good friend of mine from over there in Perth. He one of life's characters, let's say. You said you've got him on your show, who wants to go back.
Well, he hasn't gone on the show yet, but he'll be on there shortly. I spoke to his mother and him about maybe 5 minutes before we were on air, actually. was quite funny. It was quite a great conversation.
Yeah,
I had to show him how to use YouTube.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, he doesn't know how to use a boat. That's hence the story about the trailer. So, rigged his boat up. He had a decent sized boat. It was on the back of a trailer. And he's I said, if you put the tow bar properly, because it looks a bit, no, it's all good. I said, you sure? Anyway, he hadn't. And as he sort of went to move the car, the entire boat and trailer collapsed on my legs.
Jesus.
The gouge out of my leg about that long, quite all the way through to the bone. So he was. I wasn't calling him Spider. I was calling him other names. It wasn't quite as friendly as Spider.
I'm sure.
So a funny guy, a very good friend of mine, and real character.
Well, as I haven't spoken about what we're going to do later. If you've got time, we'll get together regarding the series between India and England. There'll be some matches that I'm going to bring together certain panelists, such as Alan. If you're available, certainly I'd love to have you there, and even at the Monty Panesars, and we've got a bunch of Indian incredible people to bring on as well, of all types and all levels. So it'll be interesting to have you on. It was something I'd like to talk about to you, perhaps post session. But I've had some questions here about the World Test Championship. Now it's going to be at Lords. I think it's June. I'm not sure of a date. At this stage, New Zealand is one of the front runners, with either perhaps an England, an India, with an opportunity to make that final. I don't think Australia's got the chance unless they do exceptionally well against South Africa. I think they've just lost their positioning. What do you think of that? What do you think of the concept?
Well, under normal circumstances, I would say it's great. It's just the timing's a bit unfortunate, isn't it, really? Because like we were explaining earlier in the show, I mean, it's the cricket, it's fantastic at the moment. We've got those numbers. We know that an England versus New Zealand series, if England can beat India, if that England versus New Zealand series is literally a playoff for the number one side in the world.
Exactly.
So you kind of don't really need it. It was kind of like the series down here with India and Australia. They were playing for the number one side in the world, weren't they? So
exactly.
Those series that you feel like they don't. I mean, I know the concept was brought in to try and liven up, dead rubbers. Let's say if Sri Lanka at the moment were playing South Africa, then it feels a little bit meaningless. Do you know what I mean? So, but when you're playing for the number one spot in the world, there's always interest in that series. So that's going to be the case this summer in England, and I don't know. Like I said, that's what I say. The timing's a bit funny.
Unfortunate.
Unfortunate would be the right word. So if that wasn't the case, and England was number 7 in the world and New Zealand were number 3, and quite a boring test series, isn't it? But when you're playing for the number one spot in the world, there's always excitement. So yeah, I mean, I like the concept. I really do like the concept, but I think in this particular instance, it's a bit unfortunate with the timing. And no, can't, mate. That's just what it is. They can't. When they came out with the idea, they couldn't have. So,
yeah. All right. I'm just conscious of your time, because I know you've got to feed some children, don't you? That's what you've got something pending.
It's eating, mate. So they're eating me at the house and home. I've got like 2 boys there. They're both more rugby players than cricketers, mate, and they're eating like rugby players. So I just seem to. I spend my time coaching cricket and feeding these 2 hyenas that I'm calling my sons.
All right. Well, what we'll talk about now is obviously the series, and we'll get you to talk more in the future if everything goes, if you're happy with that. Well, just your take on the England-India series. 4 tests. What's going to be the result? What's your early gauging?
Well, I'm not going to give you a total answer, and not because I'm trying to put on the fence or avoid anything. I just think it's a really good series. Normally, I think if we hadn't seen England have that success out in Sri Lanka in those conditions, then I would be firmly saying India would have a win. But in England coming off that win in Sri Lanka, and I know Sri Lanka is an inferior to India at the moment, But I feel like they're getting some good, a good crew of guys together. They're not the finished article yet, but if coming off that win in the subcontinent, there going to India, I think that series will be closer than what people think. I think India will win it, but I think it's going to be a competitive series. I don't think it's going to be the landslide that I think it might have been a year or so ago. So I think that'll be, and England won that series in Sri Lanka. I know Sri Lanka not a particularly strong outfit at the moment, but they won it without Ben Stokes. They won it without Jofra Archer, who were coming into that. So I don't know. We could say, hey, you're getting Cole a couple of quicks back, so that balances out. But it's a good series, mate, isn't it? So
bloody oath, it's been a great series.
Cracker series, and I want to watch it. So I'm not necessarily one of usually one who's tuning in for entertainment. I'm more out of interest or to keep my knowledge of the game up to speed. But I think I'll genuinely tuning in as a fan.
Well, the very fact that we've got a fairly substantial Indian audience here, Adam, and there'll be plenty of people wanting a lot of the fearlessness and the tactics you've got, which you possess, you could be an invaluable part of their armour in the future. You never know. So there might be someone listening today who may well be knocking on your door after this. Don't be surprised. No, maybe you don't want that. Maybe you're too busy with your Queensland coaching. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Feeding the kids, mate.
Now, okay. The other thing was Rohit Sharma. Quick take on Rohit Sharma. What's your impressions of him when you hear his name or see him play?
Mate, there's the rate which is improving. He has to be one of the best players in the world. I think that's not a statement there. So the thing is, there's just so many players in that Indian side that are making that in different ways. Pujara, they're all. I mean, I know in the for his just stoicness and his ability to just bat time, but and then you have Bumrah, who's like probably the best bowler in the world. You got Kohli, the best bat. So it's easy to get. It's probably a little bit like Gordon Greenwich in that side with, you know what I mean? Is that
you got Viv Richards, you got Clive Lloyd. Yeah, Gordon Greenwich is up there, but he's not as obvious because the others are there.
Yeah, because you got Kohli, it's kind of like Kohli the king, and rightly so. But what that does is when you're next best player in a side, it's like Ganguly maybe was to or something like that. Then you're still a great player, but it's or another great example would be Stuart McGill with Shane Warne. So imagine Stuart McGill. That's he's probably arguably the greatest leg spinner that's ever played if Shane Warne isn't there. So it's incredible. I think that's just a credit to India and the talent that they're producing at the moment. It's just it's a bit scary, to be honest, because they're number one side in the world and they're improving. So, and their love of the game, the size of their population, the money that's coming into the game with their ability to develop grassroots cricket. I don't want it. I mean, I like Indian people, but I'd like to see the English be the number one side in the world. But I can see a period of dominance. I can see them doing what the West Indies did in the 70s and what Australia did at the 90s. I can see that happening. The rest of the world is going to have to do something special to stop that. That's exactly what I feel.
Now, just quickly, three spinners: Leach, Bess, and Mo and Ali's. They're coming back in. Will they play all three?
Well, Mo and Ali's obviously a little bit different in that he might be fulfill an all-rounders role. Yeah. It's interesting. I coached the England Lions, this is the England A for those who don't know, out to the Caribbean, and Leach and Bess were on that tour, and they were this is only three years ago. They're really good characters, hardworking. I used to call Dominic Best the hardest working man in cricket because he literally just practices, trains, just gives his all. None of those guys are the most talented players in the world. They're not, they're not a Muralitharan who spins the ball 2 foot. They're not a Shane Warne with his variety of deliveries. They're not a Rashid Khan with his deceptiveness, but they're just traditional off spin. So but they're accurate. They're very accurate, and they will turn. And if they get on healthy wickets, they can do all right. I mean, where they'll struggle will be if the wickets aren't conducive to spin, which I can't imagine India is going to produce. Then they can be find it very hard to take wickets at that level. But amazingly, they both took 5-wicket hauls over in Sri Lanka. So their success, I mean, I mean this with the utmost respect, surprised me that they would go to those places where Lankans are renowned for their ability to play spin, Indians even more so. So I would, under normal circumstances, I would say I don't think they're going to do very well over there. I know better, and I know them as characters, and they're really strong characters. They'll turn up, they will work hard, and they'll put the ball in the right area, and they'll ask questions of the Indians. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they go.
Well, thanks for those thoughts, Adam. It's magnificent because you've got an intimate knowledge of the likes of the Queensland players that are playing for Australia. You've got intimate knowledge of the England players that are in the squads and the teams now. You're in a very good position to be able to judge, and you have obviously a very good cricketing brain. So I really appreciate your time here, and I'll openly ask you, if you've got time, we'll talk about perhaps you coming on deck for the series coming up, and we'd love to have your thoughts. You may have to put up with Alan. No, I'm joking. No, Alan will be. He's a lot of fun.
As long as he's not asking me to disconnect any boats, then I'm happier in the commentary than playing around. And just for the record, we didn't catch any fish. So
well, that was pretty useless, wasn't
it? I broke no fish. It was a good day out with the Spider-Man.
Oh, he's going to ring me straight after this interview. He's going to be on the phone and me straight away ask, because he's meant to be watching. As long as he got the IT stuff worked out, he's actually watching now. So I don't know. I'll send him a replay of it.
He's watching.
All right, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you've got some things pressing. Anything you wanted to say last up before you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, just to finish. The other thing about that side going out there is there's I mean, Rory Burns is the captain at Surrey of who I know well, and Sam Curran, who was also on that tour. So there's quite a few of that side who I'm now worked with. So I'm really interested to see how they go. It's a big series, huge series, and just it's one of those series that comes along. They don't come along enough. I think that's why the Test Championship is made. They don't come along where it's just an interest. Like the Ashes is always like that. India versus Pakistan, when I played them more often, was always a series that just had interest initially. But this is an interesting series, and I'm lucky to have worked with a lot of those England guys over the last few years. So I'll be switching in from a personal perspective and as a genuine cricket fan.
Well, again, this is an entree for you. Let's look at it as a very small entree. You've got the main course and the desserts to come. And one little question. People love asking questions, and I've got one here quickly. The best captain for England in the last 3 decades. Throw a name out there, other than Adam Hollioake.
I'm not that, mate. I'm very humble, but I'm more humble than that. The best captain, I think, is Andrew Strauss. I captained against, and it might be a surprise. I think it'll be a toss-up between Andrew Strauss and Michael Vaughan. But I think Andrew Strauss is. I think he had a bit of everything. He was tough. I captained against him a lot in county cricket. Tough. He was one of the few captains that did take a backward step against when I captained. And I know he had the respect of all of the players within the side, and he had a very good knowledge of tactics as well. So all of those things. There's more to captaincy than just, should we put a fourth slip in or a short leg? That's one element. If we were doing that, then Shane Warne might be one of the best captains that had ever played the game. But it's other you lead your life in a way that's going to make, going to bring peace to the rest of the side, not create. And you've got to keep people together. So people get caught up with the captaincy side of things. And while I think Strauss wasn't the greatest captain in the world, he was definitely solid. He wasn't bad. So I would say Andrew Strauss.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Adam. You're going to make dinner. I know that. And look,
Yeah.
I've been wonderful. I'll let you know about the dates, but it's only in the very short-term future. We'll get you on. And, you know, we've got some lovely people around you, some lovely people to support you. So thank you for your time. As always, you're a great mate and you're a great bloke. And everyone hats off to him. So thank you very much, Adam. You can have, and I like the shirt, by the way. It's very, you're going to have a lot of female audience members now going, nanas.
It's very Queensland, isn't it? I think it's got Island written on it. So it's we're on the big island in Australia. So yeah.
All right, thanks, Adam. Thanks a lot for your time.
I'll learn for you next time, mate.
All right, we'll have a chat, eh? No,
Cheers,
I don't want you wearing a bloody collar. What are you talking about? All right, I bet my phone will go ringing. Alan will be ringing me any minute now. All right, mate. Take care. All the best, huh?
Cheers, mate.
Ciao.
Bye.
And to the rest of our viewers, thank you very much for your time. Again, you know the story. View, like, and share. Subscribe to this page, this YouTube channel, Eyes on Cricket with Norman Koshak. I'll have magnificent people like Adam to talk to in the future. So talk to you soon. All the best.